We're live!
Sabado na naman mga kaibigan. It's Saturday night once again. Welcome to the City of Egg Watch, the Kuya Noel and Tito Aldo Show. Ito po si Kuya Noel at kasama si...
Ito, si amazing Tito Aldous. magandang gabi sa inyo po lahat.
Ayan, yung gusto ko yung mga maganda.
Ayun.
Hindi ako mabilis magandang gabi eh.
Ayun.
Oo, friend, magandang gabi.
Magandang gabi.
Ayun. So, tirada na tayo. Napakahalaga na pag-uusapan natin ngayon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to start this off speaking again in English because we're having a guest. Makakapanayan po natin ngayon ang MLA ng Point Douglas para magbigay ng kanyang comment, ng kanyang saloobin sa pagkakawalang sala ng pulis na nakapatay, bumaril sa 16-year-old na indigenous na kabataan, 16 years old po, si Eishia Hudson. Si Eishia Hudson po, kung yung matatandaan, noong last year, April 8, 2020 to be exact, sama po niya yung mga kaibigan niya, mali po yung ginawa niya. Nagnakaw sila allegedly, di umano, naglakaw sila ng alak sa Liquor Mart sa Sage Creek Branch. At di umano ay dala pa nila isang karnap na sasakyan na jeep. Ngayon hinagad sila ng mga pulis at nagkataon na abutan sila. Bumaba yung dalawang pulis o ilan man ang pulis para awatin sila. At dahil di umano sa pagtatanggol na sa sarili ng pulis na yon, dahil baka siya maatrasan nung rumarakas ang sasakyan na ang nagmamaneho ay si Eishia Hudson na 16 years old, ay binaril po. Si Eishia, tinamaan po siya sa bandang chest, sinugod siya sa ospital at hindi na po umabot. Sinugod siya sa Health Sciences Center at siya po ay namatay na doon. So, 16 years old, indigenous na kabataan, dahil sa pagnanakaw, dahil sa petty crime, hindi ko sinasabing tama ang ginawa ni Eishia. Hindi ko sinasabing tamang magnakaw. Hindi ko sinasabing hindi ko binibigyan ng katuwiran yung maling gawain na gano'n. Pero ang masakit dito mga kaibigan, yung pulis na yon dumaan po sa proseso. Meron po tayong tinatawag na watchdog ng mga pulis, yung IIU. Yung IIU po stands for Independent Investigation Unit ng Manitoba, na pagka po gumawa ng medyo questionable na act ang mga pulis, ito po ay iniimbestigahan. At noong pong Huwebes, nakakalungkot mang malaman, sabi ng findings ng IIU, wala raw, abswelto daw si pulis at wala dapat iatang na charges sa kanya. So we would like to hear from one of the leaders of our community, na po ang MLA ng North End. Ano naman tayo, hindi naman lingid sa inyong kaalaman, ako po ay sumusulat din bilang batang North End. Diyan ang una kong bahay sa Flora, sa North End. Makasama natin ngayon si Bernadette Smith. Siya po ang MLA, Member of Legislative Assembly ng North End. At alam ko na indigenous din si Bernadette, para mapakinggan natin ang saloobin niya bilang isang katutubo at bilang isang MLA, at kung ano yung mensahe na ibinigay ni Eishia sa atin. Wala na siya, 16-year-old, nawala na, namatay siya. Pero paano tayo ngayon? Ito ba ay, sabi nga nung tatay niya ito ay hindi lang pagkamatay ng anak ko. Ito ay bahagi ng systemic racism. Alam ko marami tayong mga opinion tungkol dito. Pero mamaya pagkatapos ng interview natin kay Bernadette, pwede kayo mag-comment, or during the conversation you can send your comments. At papasukin po natin sa linya ngayon si Bernadette Smith to talk about the killing, the death, and the decision of IIU with respect to the killing, fatally shot mga kaibigan, 16-year-old Eishia Hudson. Let's admit Bernadette Smith in our show. Hello, Bernadette.
Hi.
Hi, Bernadette.
There we go.
Hi, Noel.
Hey,
How are you?
How are you? The
I'm
other
good.
screen is Aldous.
Hi, Bernadette.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Hi,
So,
Aldous. Thanks for having me.
first of all, I would like to thank you and Emily, of course. I was chatting, calling, bugging. I bugged Emily first thing in the morning yesterday and this morning as well. And I know that you are all busy. First of all, congratulations to Wabkanu, our friend, who has been
Thank you.
re-elected as the leader of NDP. I know.
Yeah, 93%. That's a pretty strong support.
Yeah. And he will be our guest for next week. And we'll talk about NDP. But tonight, Thursday night, Thursday morning, we heard the news and we are so sad to hear what happened to the findings of IIU. And I would like to hear your take on this. I know that you denounced it, but let me hear it from you. I know that you denounced the findings made by the Independent Investigation Unit of Manitoba, which cleared the police officer, we don't know the name, from any charges for the brutal killing of Eishia Hudson. What's your take on this, Bernadette?
Well, I was very disheartened by the news, of course. You know, this is a young child. She was 16 years old. And, you know, for her to be, killed the way she was, and for that to be on camera and her parents to watch that video over and over again, and then to hear, you know, that the officer has been cleared, the family has no accountability. There's no accountability to the family, to Eishia, you know, and her family deserves accountability, and there needs to be changes. And, you know, when I put on my Facebook that, you know, Aisha's death shouldn't be in vain, that there should be, you know, her legacy should be a legacy of change, where no Indigenous person or person of color has to ever worry about, you know, being shot and killed and, you know, the circumstances being different than if it was a non-Indigenous person. And, you know, as I watched and, you know, was watching on social media and listening to what her friends' accounts were, and, you know, how beautiful this young girl was, young person that, you know, had their whole lives ahead of them, that the end result should have been different. Our police need to learn how to de-escalate rather than, you know, react. The other thing is, you know, the province bought a helicopter. That helicopter is supposed to be used in, you know, so that police aren't chasing after vehicles, especially if they're stolen. This isn't the first, death. As we heard, there was a young woman with her child. The police was pursuing this van. They stopped pursuit, and that van, you know, continued to go at fast speeds down a residential area, hit a van and a mother and her newborn baby. I think the baby was like under a year old, not a newborn, but, you know, an infant. And what are we doing with this police helicopter if we're still engaging in high-speed chases and, drawing guns? The other thing was that was one death of 3 within a span of 10 days where Indigenous people were killed by the police. And, you know, we have to stop, shooting to kill and being the judge, jury, and executor. And that's exactly what happened with, the IIU's findings in this. There's, you know, it's a shame. And I feel really bad for Aisha's family, but also, you know, I'm concerned for, you know, the Indigenous community. And, you know, I wish this province would put funds into, you know, youth programs, to, you know, mental health supports, so that when we're talking about, you know, the defunding of police have a function and they have a role, absolutely. But we need to relook at those systems and really change and look at the systemic racism that happened with Eishia. and make the changes, through an inquiry, that there's tangible actions put in place that address what happened to Eishia, so that it never, ever happens again and no other family has to go through what her family's going through.
You mentioned about changes, Bernadette. The officer who fired the fatal shot was never interviewed by IIU in person and cannot be compelled to do so, right?
Yeah.
He only submitted a written statement. So, with this process, do you think it is now high time to change the legislation or the Police Act?
Well, I think what has to happen is the province needs to look at the review that was recently done, and they need to take those recommendations. And one of the recommendations was that when there is an act such as what happened with Eishia, where it results in death or, violence, a violent end or an assault, that the officer has to, submit and go under review like everybody else. Basically what they took was a written statement of all of, everything that were in their book documenting. But, not everybody's afforded that kind of, way of testifying. And they should have to testify just like everybody else.
Mm-hmm. Now, when I was listening to the news conference and I heard the statement of the parents of Eishia, William, the dad of Eishia, in a statement said he had already expected that the police officer will be cleared. Now, when I heard this, I said, this is a statement of a non-confidence to the system and to the police institution. Eishia's killing is, I think, in my opinion, is deep-rooted to the relationship between the community and the law enforcers, right? In your view, Bernadette, I used to live in the North End, by the way. I live in Flora. In your view, as a North Ender, as an MLA, what is the missing link here? And what do you think we must do as a community? Are we accountable for the death of this young girl?
Well, I think, part of it is, that systemic change that needs to happen and community calling for that change to happen, right? We have power and voice and power in numbers. And, you hit it bang on, the nail when you talked about the relationship between the police and the Indigenous community. There is a very, history of distrust there. There's been 500 years of colonialism, and it started with the RCMP that were, born out of policing Indigenous people, and that's continued. So when something happens, Indigenous people don't tend to call the police, and that's, that's an issue in itself, because Indigenous people shouldn't have to think twice about calling the police. And part of it is, police coming in, and we've seen other people, post about assaults when they've called the police for help, and then they've in turn been assaulted themselves. Or there's, racial profiling happening where people are stopped on the street because they're Indigenous. People question that. Why am I being stopped? Just because I'm Indigenous? So, that relationship needs to change. And it starts with, a two-way relationship, basically. But also the police have to, really look at the systemic racism that's embedded within that police system. And there needs to be some accountability when those things happen, like with Eishia, with racial profiling. I can think about a woman who, the hotel called the police, and the police came to the room, and both the woman and her partner was assaulted, and she won her case against the police. She was granted damage in the amount of, I think it was over $100,000. Mm-hmm. But again, that police officer didn't lose his job. I don't know what the consequences were, but they were allowed to keep their job. And there needs to be anti-racism training so that police are looking at their own bias. And, I'm someone who has relationships with the police because I have a sister who's missing. But that relationship in the beginning was very strained. They didn't look for my sister for 10 days. And we think part of it was because she was Indigenous. She was a woman. She was known to work the streets. She had a criminal record and she used drugs. And none of those things should ever be a determining factor in how police, respond. It's a person missing, someone's loved one. You're reporting it, and they should just take it and, investigate it like they would any other case. But Indigenous people don't have the confidence in the police that they'll do that. And it's a long history, and it starts with colonialism, but it also has to have the officers look at themselves, because I know lots of police officers, and not everybody, is racist or does racial profiling or forgets why they got into becoming a police officer in the first place, which was to serve and protect and to help make our community safer and, better for everyone. And there's a lot of officers out there that are desensitized because they see it each and every day. And, I worry about the mental health of, people who are on the front lines dealing with this day in and day out. And, as someone who worked in the child welfare system and, saw, so many inequalities within that system, and even working with the police, calling them and letting them know that we have a youth who's missing. And, there's no media release put out. It's like, oh, they're gone missing again. But it's like, this is someone's child. This is, and it has to change. It has to shift. And, there needs to be better supports for police, but also for community, and especially anti-racism training and services so that officers can access when they're, struggling with their mental health and becoming desensitized.
Now, before this is my last question, Bernadette. I know that the party is super busy today because of the convention. This is a question for you as a member of the NDP. What's the next move after this as a party? What do we expect from the NDP party in response to the systemic racism in Manitoba? I know that there is a big chance that the NDP will be back as our government. I'm very positive on that. How do we prepare our province on this? Not only on the economic side, on the response to pandemic, but this issue of racism, systemic racism in the province. How does the party prepare for this?
Well, today there was a resolution put on the floor by Nahanni Fontaine, who's the NDP MLA for St. John's, calling on an inquest into the shooting death of Eishia. So I think it starts with, getting that report, really, thoroughly going through that report and looking at what are some of the issues that led up to that, and how can we make change so that that never happens again. And I think, with the NDP, we're always looking at how do we, create places and spaces so that everyone feels valued, that there's, not a value put on race or gender or religion, that everyone, has a place and that everyone's valued. And I think we really need to, as a society, shift back to, that time where we took care of one another and we looked at each other as neighbors, right? And that we all are one people. We all bleed. We all have a story, and my story may be different than your story, may be different than, someone who's living on the street. And we have to quit othering people and looking at people as if they're less than, but looking really at how do we all work together to create change, and change collectively as a society. I think about Winnipeg as a city, but also Manitoba as a province, and how amazing we are. How we come together, and coming out of this pandemic, we have to remember that. How we cared and supported one another, and the sacrifices that we made on behalf of all Manitobans, and that we never forget that, and moving forward, that we continue that generosity of one another, and that caring and sharing, and really opening up opportunities for one another. And that's what our party is. We stand for, making sure that everyone has a voice, everyone has a place, everyone has a space, and that opportunities are created so that everyone can participate and contribute.
Bernadette, after the pandemic, I hope to meet you at the Bell on Selkirk Avenue. I'm going to contact Michael Champagne and the team, Kevin Chief and Wasak, all of those guys. We will celebrate the solidarity of the North Ender. We will celebrate the solidarity of Manitobans. Thank you very much for sharing your time today, and we'll chat again, Bernadette.
Yes, thank you both for having me. I appreciate the time that you've given me.
Have a wonderful evening. Bye now.
You as well.
There we go.
Ayun. Nakausap po natin yan si Bernadette Smith. Ang sarap kausap ni Bernadette dahil from the heart ng isang North Ender po yan. Kung si Bernadette po ay isang indigenous woman din, at nire-represent niya ang community kung saan maraming mga katutubo. Alam ko tayong mga Pilipino, hindi sa magpakatotoo tayo. Meron tayong mga hinanakit. Ito masalimuot na issue to eh. Pagka tinalakay natin ng ganito, di ba? Titimbangin natin, alam natin na marami tayong mga katutubo dito sa Winnipeg na nasasangkot sa iba't ibang mga hindi magandang gawain. Andiyan ang nakawan, andiyan ang mga patayan, di ba? Minsan, galit tayo. Binansagan pa nga natin sila ng sabihin natin pana, ang tawag natin pana, which is hindi po dapat nating tinatawag na gano'n dahil po ay degrading para sa kanila. So, hindi ko pinagtatanggol ang mga ginagawang masama ng mga katutubo. Pero dapat po hindi natin ini-stereotype ang lahi nila. Dahil hindi lahat ng mga katutubo ay gumagawa ng masama na nakikita natin outside, nakikita natin sa street. At lagi natin tatandaan ang dahilan kung bakit sila nagkagano. 500 years yung pinalawanag nga ni Bernadette Smith na pahapyaw. Matagal na may kolonyalismo na nasaksak sa isip nila, naging bahagi ng kultura nila. Kung bakit sila mahilig sa alak. Kung bakit sila gano'n ang pamumuhay. Pero hindi dapat mamuhay sila doon sa nakaraan. Kaya nga marami tayong mga matagumpay na mga katutubo tulad ni Kevin Chief. Tulad ng mismong mayor natin. Si mayor natin ay isang Métis. Si Mayor Bowman po ay isang katutubo. So hindi lahat po ng katutubo ay hindi dapat natin, ang message natin ngayon, hindi lahat ng katutubo ay dapat i-stereotype na masasama. Marami po tayong mga kaibigan na katutubo, kakilala, na nag-excel at maganda ang contribution sa community. Ang pinag-usapan po natin dito, yung systemic racism na tila naging napaka-obvious doon sa nangyaring pag-abswelto ng IIU doon sa pulis na pumatay kay Eishia Hudson. So, Kuya Aldous,
Yes,
alam
sir.
kong
Ito lang naman.
iniisip ka dyan.
Yung nga, tama ang sabi mo. At magkapakatotoo na tayo. Tayo mga immigrants dito sa Winnipeg. Nai-stereotype rin naman tayo. Pupunta ako sa other side. Nai-stereotype rin naman tayo. Dahil number one, sa ating language barrier. Number two, yung ating population lumalaki. No? May mga ibang kasing nauna dito, ibang lahi, na parang na-aloof na sa isang Filipino community na lumalaki. Hindi lang naman ang Filipino community na lumalaki. May ibang lahi rin, Indian. Lumalaki rin sila yung community nila. May nakakaramdam sila ng parang sila na yung na-outcast, sila na nagiging minority. Mabalik rin naman tayo po dun sa mga katutubo natin ditong mga pana. May kasalanan din naman po yung mga sinaunang Pilipino na dumating dito eh. Mali yung pagkaka-orient nila sa atin, yung mga bagong dumating. O wag ka pupunta ng Main Street. Nakakatakot dyan. Wag ka pupunta dyan sa magantong area. Nakakatakot dyan. Wag ka magbibigay ng ganitong pera dahil pang-iinom lang nila, pang-bibili ng drugs. Pero hindi mo alam talaga kung ano yung buhay nila. Hindi mo alam kung saan sila nanggaling. Hindi mo alam yung kwento. Kaya may isang nagsabing philosopher nga, sabi, bigyan kita ng $10, masaya ka na. Dinalik sa kanya nung nagpapalimos. Hindi ko kailangan $10 mo. Kailangan ko oras mo para makinig ka sa kwento ng buhay ko.
Yun.
Yun ang Tayo, tama ka Kuya Noel, nag-i-stereotype tayo. Judgmental tayo agad-agad.
Ayun.
Di ba? Pero bawal ang judgmental dito sa Winnipeg.
Ayun. Pero maganda yun. Kung gusto nyo mag-participate sa conversation natin na to, alam ko medyo sensitibo to para sa ating lahat. Pero it's time na buksan natin yung box of worm at alaman natin pagka binuksan mo yun, magkakalabasan talaga di ba? Kasi minsan nagkakahiyaan na pag-uusapan yung mga ganitong bagay. Pero dapat po pinag-uusapan natin at dapat ma-educate tayo kung paano tratuhin ang ibang lahi, lalo na mga katutubo. Tayo pong mga Pilipino, napakamahilig natin magbansag. Di ba? Ano tawag natin sa ibang lahi? Sa opisina na lang sa workplace, hindi sa opisina, sa workplace. Ito lagi nangyayari, yung mga ibang lahi, may bansag tayo diyan. 'Di ba? May bansag tayo na babansagan natin na batibot, babansagan natin ng kung ano-ano para hindi mahalata na sila yung pinag-uusapan natin, hindi ba? Pero minsan siguro nakakahalata tayo ngayon, 'di ba?
Alam nila.
Alam nila na pinag-uusapan sila, alam nila na may bansag tayo sa kanila. So doon nahahati-hati. Di ba? Nakakalungkot dahil pumunta tayo sa isang bansa na to na talagang yung concept ng diversity, yung prinsipyo ng diversity ay talagang napakataas. Kaya dapat yung pagkakaiba-iba natin pag sama-samahin natin para makabuo tayo ng magandang community. Di ba?
Tama ka rin dyan, Kuya
Pasa na yung mga systemic racism, hindi komot indigenous siya, papatay na lang. Sabi nga ni Mike Smoke, yung kaibigan nating katubo, brother, sabi niya, dun sa message na sa atin dalawa, di ba? What if yung nagdadrive na yon at nagnakaw nagkarnap na yon, puti.
Yeah.
Parilimba agad ng pulis yun. Well, that's a good question, di ba? Katulad ng nangyari sa nagrarally ang Black Lives Matter sa States nung last year. May lumabas na isang puti.
Yeah.
May hawak na baril. Namaril. Ano ginawa ng pulis sa Amerika? Wala. Kung ang namaril na yun, itim, matagal ng patay yun. Di ba? Hindi lang dito sa Canada, hindi lang sa Amerika. Alam natin yung racism everywhere. Kaya in our own little way siguro, i-educate natin yung mga kaibigan natin, mga anak natin on how to treat other people fairly. Yung equity dapat lagi nating ino-observe at isinasapamuhay.
Tama ka dyan. Pinakasimple lang, Kuya Noel. Yung very basic. Pansin mo yung ibang lahi, pag yung kumpul-kumpul ang Pilipino, kumpul-kumpul ang ibang lahi. Nagsasalita sa native language. Ano sasabihin ng puti? English please.
Yes.
Yun lang. Respeto, tama sabi mo Respetuhin natin yung bansa nila. Nandito tayo Sa bowl tayo Ang salita dito, English. English
Yeah.
tayo.
Yeah.
Di ba?
Yeah. Totoo yun. Kasi pag respeto yun, dahil hindi mo alam, isipin mo na lang kung may hindi ka maintindihan, di ba? As a courtesy at as a respect, dapat magsasalita ka na naiintindihan ng lahat. Lalo na sa workplace,
Eh,
sa
sa workplace
lunchroom.
yan, tama ka.
Di ba? Sa workplace, lalo na sa lunchroom. Pagka nagkainan, kumpul-kumpul dyan, mga Pilipino. Kumpul-kumpul, ganito. Inadidivide yung Canada pagka ganun. Di ba? Yun, yung mga, yun, tama yun. Tamang pinunto mo yun dahil as a courtesy, dapat, pagka ganun mga nasa publiko tayo, dapat, ginagamit natin kahit pawardi-wardi yung alam naman, di ba? Hindi naman natin first language ang English, pero nakakapagsalita naman tayo, di ba? At least nag-e-effort tayo to communicate not only to fellow Filipinos, Filipino-Canadians, but to all Canadians. Para nagkakaintindihan tayo.
Pero nag-share lang ako sa'yo. Pero masakit to.
Sige, sir.
On the other side naman, tayong mga imigrante, tama sabi mo kayo, Noel, nagtatrying hard tayo to communicate with them. I-speak natin yung language nila. Kaso syempre mayroon tayong language barrier, di ba? Yung ibang side naman sasabihin sa atin, ayaw ko makipag-usap sa'yo dahil hindi kita maintindihan.
Oo.
Ano sinasabi mo? Come again? Masakit sa atin yun. Di ba? Especially pag nasa industriya tayo ng sales, sa industriya ka ng customer service, masakit rin yun. Kaya kailangan din natin talagang, tama sabi mo, kailangan natin mag-unite.
Yeah.
Respetuhin nila tayo, respeto natin yung lengguwahe nila, ang kultura nila.
Tama yun. Kasi minsan, nahalata mo na inuinsulto ka eh.
Oo.
Di ba? Di-insulto ka dahil ang first language, hindi naman first language mo English. So,
masakit makarinig ng mga ganun na salita. Ikaw naman as naghahanap buhay, nawawala yung self-esteem mo. Na magsalita na kanilang lengguwahe.
Yeah.
Yun lang po.
Tama yan. So, maganda yung usapan natin ngayon. Pwede nyo i-review. Share nyo lang po sa inyong mga kaibigan ang magandang interview natin kay Bernadette on Abswelto ng pulis na pumatay kay Eishia Hudson. 16 years old po. Wala na yung buhay niya. Again, hindi nga natin pinagtatanggol yung ginawa niyang masama na pagnanakaw, allegedly sa pagnanakaw ng alak sa liquor mart, pero hindi ho dahilan yun para kumitil tayo ng buhay. At sana, mabago yung sistema ng IIU, ng Independent Investigation Unit ng Manitoba. Watchdog kayo ng pulis eh. Ang ginagawa nyo hindi naman sa pag-ano kinukonsintin nyo pa yung mga pulis na gumawa ng. Anyway, meron tayong less than 8 minutes to wrap up. Merong nawawalang sasakyan, Brad.
Ayun, RAV4.
Natagpuan na ba? Hindi pa?
Wala pang balita si Catherine Rufon pala. So, ano ko yun? RAV4 Toyota, red, 2015, plate number, HNA, Hotel Nancy Alpha, 895. Sa St. Vital area nawala.
Ano lesson dito, Tito Aldous? Nagpapainit ng sasakyan eh.
Oo, two things yun.
Iniwan eh. In 2 minutes daw, wala ang sasakyan. So, hindi natin sinisisi na nawalan ng sasakyan. Kaya lang lesson to sa atin lahat. Tawagan nyo si Mark Banag. Bumili kayo ng remote starter. Shout out kayo. Pero nakahanda ba yung video na binigay sa atin ni Mark Kevin?
Nawala ko siya.
Pero hindi, natin yon. Ilalagay natin sa page natin yung kaibigan natin si Mark Kevin. Yan, nakatila sa Amber Trail. Meron siyang pinadala sa atin na video from Winnipeg Police Service tungkol sa, huwag mong iiwan ng sasakyan mo na umaandar dahil anytime, in few seconds, less than a minute, mawawala yan. Tulad na nangyari sa kababayan natin, hopefully, natagpuan na sana yun, no? Pero, sana, lesson to sa atin lahat, lalo na ngayong winter. Huwag niyong iiwan na nakasaksakang susi ng sasakyan nyo. Aming pinaiinit.
Kuya Noel, ulitin ko lang yung information ni Catherine Rufon. Pag nakita niyo po yung RAV4 Toyota 2015, pula, plate number HNA 895. Tawagan si Catherine Rufon at 204-298-0761.
Ayun.
Yun po.
Siyempre, bago tayo magtapos, meron pa tayong 5 minutes na pasalamatan ng ating mga sponsor. May bago tayong sponsor, Brad.
Ayun.
Ikaw ang nakakaalam niya. Basta mga negosyo.
Negosyo, usapan negosyo.
Oo.
Sige
Tirahin
po.
mo.
Kung gusto niya po magpadala sa Philippines, pinakamagandang rate.
Oo nga pala.
Pinakamataas.
Parang gusto ko magpadala. Saan ba pwede magpadala ngayon, Brad? Alam mo, may bago eh.
Hindi mo na kailangan i-memorize yan.
Ayun,
Padala ka na
somewhere.
kay Millennial Currency Exchange. Ayan, kontakin si
Again,
Bobby.
Millennial
Currency Exchange.
Ayun, saan niya matatagpuan?
Ay, sa Sargent Avenue. Ayun po, nakapost po sa ating ads kung yung kanyang numero, si Bobby ng Millennial Currency
Si Bobby ba?
Exchange. Oo.
Si Bobby? Yung magandang lalaki si Bobby?
Yung magandang lalaki.
Sabi ko.
Ibigay ng
diba?
best service, best rates, and exchange rates.
Ayun.
Meron pa isa.
Pagka magpapadala, hanapin lang yan. Millennial
Currency Exchange.
Currency Exchange sa Sargent.
Sa Sargent.
Hanapin nyo si Bobby.
Bobby. Ayun, nag-iisa lang dun.
Magandang lalaki yun. Tsaka
Meron pa
mabait.
isa. Nag-uusapan magandang lalaki, dapat maganda magdamit.
Ayun.
Online store, parating na. Red
Ayan.
Closet. Red Closet ata yun, tawag dun.
Ayun.
Si Cecilia, hanapin si Cecilia. Number ni Cecilia, 204-807-6343. Yan. Gusto
Ano
niyo
ano yun? Parang online, ano yun? Boutique.
parang online shopping.
Ayun.
Yung nauuso ngayon. May online
Ay, yung
store siya.
nagbebenta-benta online. Ganyan. Yung mga sinusuot.
Susuot.
Yung mga
Damit.
dibdibang pagbebenta.
Ayun.
Di ba?
Yan mauso ngayon.
Oo.
Susunod.
Susunod.
Oo. Yung DIL bags. Parating na.
Muting na. Muting na. Hindi. Okay. Ano yung pre?
Ay,
Parating na.
mga genuine leather yan ng mga bags. Mga high-end bags.
Ayun.
DIL lang yan.
DIL ang brand.
Oo, DIL. Hindi, DIL ang magkikerry. Magpa-franchise.
Ayun, DIL yung ano, yung distributor.
Distributor.
Mga ano yan, mga magagandang bag yan.
Oo, high-end lang yan.
Alam mo-
Respetadong bag yan.
Alam mo yan, Tito Aldous.
Yes,
Sakto yan, Valentine's Day.
Valentine.
Kung kayo wala pang idea kung ano ibibigay sa jowa nyo, sa
Aha.
misis nyo, sa girlfriend nyo, sa kalibin nyo, kung ano man, no. Bag,
Bag, okay. Damit. Galing kay Cecilia, no?
damit, oo. O kaya, padalan yung pera.
Padalan
Kung nasa
pera.
Pilipinas, di ba? Padalan yung pera. Munta kayo, millennial.
Millennial currency exchange lang yan.
Pag naman sumakit likod nyo, magpamasahe kayo.
Ako. Sino pang hahanapin?
Ay!
Wala nang iba.
Likod ka, bro.
Patricia Salceda.
Patricia.
Oo.
Pag nagutom kayo,
Depende sa gutom.
oo.
Seafoods o kaya karne. O kaya
Ayun.
hotdog.
Oo.
Oh.
Kasi foods, alam na this. Di ba?
Yes,
Tsaka mga
foods.
street foods. Mga siomay, ganyan. Siopaw, bake right. Ya. Pagka gusto nyo magluto ng mga fresh, kung naghahanap kayo ng mga fresh na mga karne, yan. Aldous Market na yun.
Ayun.
Meat nyo. Di ba?
Na kailangan namin. Pag nakain na sa mid,
Ayun, uminom kayo tubig.
Kanjan water.
Oo. Andyan lang dapat.
Iniinom na ko yan, Kanjan water.
Oo.
Kailangan nyo, gusto nyo mag-cleanse ang inyong colon. Barley. Yan.
So, yun po, ang ating mga sponsors for tonight at every night, syempre, kung kailangan nyo ng abogado, ating abogado ng bayan, Mac Philippines, yung opisina niya, Mac Philippines, hindi Mac Philippines, pababago na natin yan. Pagka naubusin Wabcanoe, sabihin natin, biro lang. Pero, speaking of Wabcanoe, we will be having Wabcanoe again for the second time sa ating show dahil ngayon pong araw na ito, na-re-elect po siya, 93% ng members ng NDP ang bumoto na siya pa rin ang magiging leader ng NDP dito sa Manitoba. So yan po ay isang paghahanda sa provincial election in 2 years time or 3 years time yata. So abangan natin kung mananatili ba ang conservative sa province, ang tropa ni Pallister na hindi natatakbo ulit bilang premier, O ito, ay babalik ba tayo sa NDP government? Let's watch out.
Ayun.
Yung liberal, tatlo ang seat nila. Tingnan natin kung madadagdagan ng seat nila. At Green Party, meron pa tayo isang party dito, yung Green Party, na wala pang representation. Pero si Elizabeth May sa federal, meron siyang representation. Pero sa province, wala po siya. So, abangan natin yan in terms of provincial politics po yan. Makakasama natin next week si Wab Kinuan, ang leader po. Kaya ilik lang, ngayong araw na to, nagkaroon sila ng virtual convention. First time in the history ng NDP party virtual convention. 93% panalo si Wab Kinuan. Congratulations. So,
next weekend, guess natin, no?
Next week.
Papatay Kuya Noel.
NDP tayo. Pero kami, wala ho kaming partido ni Tito Alves. Partido namin, DIL. Diverse Industries Limited.
Kaya naman, ilan ba tayo? Magpapabati lang po na marami tayong mga viewers.
Ayun, sige. Meron kang 1 minuto.
Ayun, mabilisan to. Patian portion. Okay, Marilyn Mojos, Arta, good evening. Sol Monte Alto from the Philippines. Mayor Pete Dumantay. Benhur Velasco from the Philippines. Majad Jamora. Jessie Salongan, thank you. Dolores De Rosario and Dandan Fides. Bago itong mga to. Millennial Currency Exchange, Rodora Suarez. Ay naku, masarap yan po yan. Kung kailangan nyo po ng tawag dyan, masarap na amoy sa bahay.
Yung mga essence. Oil.
Suarez.
Analo.
Bake Right Bakery, Kuya Noel.
Ayun, Bake Right. At sa lahat ng mga nanonood po sa inyo, we'll see you again. Malapot na pong maputol ang aming Zoom dahil kami hindi nagbabayad ng Zoom. We will see you again next time. Maraming pong salamat. Ito po si Kuya Noel.
And Tito Aldous, dito lang sa
The City of Pueg. The City of Pueg Watch. Kuya Noel and Tito Aldous Show. Maraming pong salamat sa inyo lahat. See you again with Web Canoe next week.
Ayun. Thank you so much. Happy Saturday.
Bye-bye.
Stay safe.